Welcome to the Avatar Full Story Series. This is where we grab the complete stories for the different Avatar videos and we combine it into one complete story. Today we're going to be doing the full story for The Promise. This is the first story in the Avatar The Last Airbender comic series and takes place immediately after the animated series ends. So let's go ahead and dive on in to Avatar The Last Airbender, The Promise.
Water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. 100 years passed, and Katara and her brother Sokka discovered the new Avatar, an airbender named Aang. And although his airbending skills were great, he had a lot to learn before he could save anyone. But from the day they first met, Katara believed that Aang would save the world. With the help of his friends, Aang defeated Fire Lord Ozai and ended the 100 Years' War. Following this, Zuko, Ozai's son, and Aang's ally became the new Fire Lord. Together with the Earth King Kuei, Aang and Zuko promised to restore the four nations to harmony. Aang looks up at the map on the wall, pointing out the Fire Nation colonies. I never knew that the Fire Nation had built so many colonies in the Earth Kingdom, Aang notes. Looking at all the locations on the map, the Earth King stands close by. Yes, for the Earth people, they are a constant reminder of the war, like a scar, King Kuei tells him. Kuei turns and apologizes to Zuko, not meaning any offense, but Zuko waves off the comment. It is my duty to bring healing to the world. I'll remove those colonies. I'll do whatever it takes, he promises. Aang steps forward. He knows that moving the colonies won't be easy, and they should probably have someone oversee to make sure that everything goes peacefully. Someone like me, I'm the Avatar. Making stuff go peacefully is kinda my thing, he tells them. The Earth King is excited to have Aang helping with the relocation, and Katara and Sokka quickly agree to help. It'll be a movement towards harmony. We'll call it, the Earth King begins to say, but is quickly interrupted by Sokka. The Harmony Restoration Movement, he exclaims. What's with you and your goofy names for everything? Toph asks him. It's a gift, he tells her. The Earth King plans a large celebration to announce the movement, and that night, Aang and Katara decide what they truly mean to each other, embracing in a kiss. Ah! Sokka screams, interrupting them as he steps outside. Haven't you ever heard of knocking, Sokka? Katara asks. But Sokka explains that you don't have to knock when you're walking outside. He also tells her she shouldn't kiss anyone in front of him, since it gives him the oogies. Oogies? Ah, you're so immature sometimes. What about you and Suki? She asks. The two begin to argue back and forth. Finally, Aang interrupts them, asking why Sokka came outside in the first place. Sokka nods, telling him that they are about to head out and want to take Appa for a ride before the Earth King's celebration. The group of friends have a great night riding Appa through the clean air. Nearby, the fireworks begin to explode and they all marvel at the pretty colors. Below them, they can hear the crowds cheering, hearing the news of the Harmony movement. Hey, wanna know what fireworks are like for me? Close your eyes, Toph tells Sokka, coming up behind him. Boom! She screams, laughing. Aang speaks with Zuko, trying to get his friend to smile. But Zuko turns incredibly serious. He tells Aang that he visited with his father the other day. I've been meaning to ask you a favor, Aang, Zuko tells his friend. If you ever see me turning into my father, I want you to end me, he tells him. Aang is shocked, but Zuko explains that his family's legacy will always be with him. He knows he needs to heal what his father did, but the throne comes with a lot of pressure. If I'm honest with myself, I need a safety net. The world needs a safety net. That's what I need you to be, Aang. The safety net, Zuko tells him. Aang begins to argue, telling Zuko he's not like his father, but the young Fire Lord insists. Looking over at Katara, she gives Aang a nod. Fine, I promise, Aang tells his friends sadly. Fireworks continue to explode in the distance, illuminating Appa as he gently flies through the air. 1 year later, it is a clear night over the massive royal palace in the Fire Nation. Inside his bedroom, Zuko tosses and turns. Sweat pours down his forehead as he grits his teeth. Finally, he sits up gasping. "Who's there?" he yells, bringing the guards into the room. They tell him that he is in the most secure room in the entire palace, and that no one is trying to kill him. But suddenly, both guards are knocked unconscious. Zuko turns, blasting Fireball into the darkness, demanding to know who is there. From the shadows, a young woman descends, twirling a chain whip as she leaps. "Down with the traitor! Down with the Fire Lord who betrays his own people!" she yells. Zuko avoids her chain, blasting another fireball at her that she quickly dodges. The chain wraps around his foot, pulling him to the ground. Pausing only briefly, Zuko launches into a combo, tripping the woman up and knocking her to the ground. He reaches out, pulling the mask from her and revealing her face. "Convince me not to take your life," he orders her, preparing for another strike. "Go ahead. My family has been loyal to yours for generations. By getting rid of me, you would simply complete your betrayal," she tells him, anger in her eyes. Zuko is shocked when the girl tells him that her father is the mayor of Yudao, first of the Fire Nation colonies. The next day, the mayor is carried through the streets of Yudao. He orders his servants to stop, stepping from his carriage to find his daughter's hands tied and escorted by Fire Nation soldiers. When her father questions her, she informs him that she went and saw someone about their problem. Him, she indicates over her shoulder as Zuko walks towards them. "You must be Mayor Morishita. Your daughter snuck into my home and tried to kill me," Zuko informs the mayor, who is shocked by the news. The mayor falls to his knees, bowing before his ruler and begging Zuko to show mercy. "I should have this whole city burned down," Zuko threatens, but the young girl steps forward, still angry. "Why bother? The Harmony Restoration Movement will accomplish the same thing without you having to lift a finger," she snaps at him. "Why can't you colonials get it through your thick skulls? The Restoration Movement is a means to peace," he tells them. The mayor suddenly stands, his own words growing angry. "Peace? Peace for who? With all due respect, Your Majesty, my family has lived on this land for generations. This city was built on our own blood and sweat. We have just as much right to be here as anyone else," the mayor tells him. He stands, telling Zuko that they are citizens of the Fire Nation, and that his father would never let the Earth King and Avatar bully him into doing something so bad for his people. Memories flash of Zuko visiting his father in prison, of demanding to know what happened to his mother. But the former Fire Lord merely smiled, telling his son to bring tea next time so they could chat. "I'll give you advice on how to be a good Fire Lord. Wouldn't that be nice?" Zuko turns away from his father, walking out of the room. "Do you think being Fire Lord is easy? The throne comes with pressures, and those pressures will change you. But if you can stand the heat, you'll become something more," the Fire Lord tells his son. "You'll be back, and I'll be here, waiting, son," he tells Zuko as the door shuts behind his son. Anger fills Zuko as he slams the mayor into the wall, his fist a burning ball of flames. "I am not my father!" Zuko shouts. "No, young man, you're not. Fire Lord Ozai had many faults, but he was never a coward, never a traitor," the mayor tells him. Off the coast of the Fire Nation, a group of colonists ride aboard the Fire Nation ship, bringing them back to the nation of their people. Overhead, Aang carries others on the back of Appa. He turns back to one of the colony mayors, smiling at her. "Don't worry, Mayor Nishi. My team and I have helped dozens of Fire Nation colonies move back to their homeland already. They've all loved coming back," he tells her. But the mayor is not convinced, telling Aang that those colonies were young. Their people had no roots in the Earth Kingdom. But Aang explains that the Fire Nation is different under Zuko's rule, that he is trying to re-establish classic traditions amongst his people. demonstrating by showing her a Fire Nation dance. When the ship docks, they begin to offload the people and supplies, but they are told to stop by a group of soldiers. "You are colonials? Return to the Earth Kingdom by order of Fire Lord Zuko. Fire Lord Zuko has officially withdrawn his support from the Harmony Restoration movement." Everyone just stares in shock at this declaration. Later, at the Beifong Metal Bending Academy in the Earth Kingdom, Toph's students are distracted by a crowd gathering at the city gates far below them. They're shocked as she stamps her feet behind them, sending them into the air with a blast of earth. Facing towards the city, she is surprised to notice the crowd. But above her, she hears Appa's roar, and as she orders her students to continue to train, she runs outside and launches herself up into the air, and with a slight whump, she lands on the back of Appa. "Hey guys!" She smiles. Sokka and Katara move to their friend, everyone's smiling at the reunion, and after they catch up, Katara tells Toph that she is happy that she's here. Aang needs all the support he can get right now, she tells her. "Hey, where is Twinkletoes anyway?" Toph asks. Katara shows Toph where Aang is meditating, telling her how Zuko withdrew his support from the restoration movement. He's holed himself up in Yu Dao with a bunch of his soldiers. He won't let anyone in or out. That's where we're heading, Sokka tells her. They all look at Aang, with Katara telling them that he is meditating because of what he might have to do, because of the promise he made. In the astral plane, Aang sits before the spirit of Avatar Roku. "You've done your duty. The war is over, and yet the world still isn't at peace. I'm sorry, Aang. You are still dealing with the consequences of my actions," Roku tells him. Aang sighs, telling Roku that he should never have made his promise to Zuko. "I mean, I didn't even kill Ozai, and he was evil all the way through. How am I supposed to kill my own firebending teacher, my friend?" Aang asks. But Roku tells Aang that Zuko was in his clearest moment when he asked Aang to make the promise. "He knew what was at stake," Roku explains. The past Avatar closes his eyes, telling Aang that he wishes he had ended Fire Lord Sozin all those years ago, saving the thousands who have died during the war. "When you are in a position of power, you must put the needs of your people above your own. Zuko, at one time, understood this," Roku says. Aang nods, promising to go to Yu Dao and talk to Zuko first. Roku nods, telling Aang to heed his wisdom and be decisive. Appa lands at the gates of Yu Dao, and the group discovers a large crowd of protesters standing by, chanting for the Fire Nation to leave the Earth Kingdom. The group cheers as Aang approaches, with their leader Smellerbee stepping forward. "Aang, we were hoping you would come. So what's the plan of attack? The freedom fighters are at your service," she tells them. But Aang surprises them when he tells them that he just wants to talk to Zuko first. The freedom fighters offer to break open a new gate, allowing Aang to get past the Fire Nation soldiers, but he smiles and waves them off. "That won't be necessary. We'll find a way in," he tells them as he pulls out his glider, looking at Katara. The two leap into the air, flying over the gate with ease. Aang and Katara land in the Yu Dao courtyard, bringing the attention of the Fire Nation soldiers. "Flamey-o, Hotman!" Aang greets them, bowing. "This city is under the protection of the Fire Lord himself. No one may enter without his express permission, not even the Avatar. Leave now," the captain of the guard orders as he steps forward. "Please, I would like to talk to Lord Zuko. That is all," Aang tells the captain, still bowing. The captain launches into a series of attacks, which Aang easily avoids. Finally, he taps one foot against the ground, causing the earth to push up at the captain's feet, throwing him to the ground. "I don't want to fight," Aang warns, stepping into a combat pose. The other soldiers look on hesitantly. "What are you fools waiting for? Attack!" the captain yells. The soldiers launch fire at Aang, causing him to leap and dodge around him. "Aang!" Katara shouts in fear. "Don't worry, sweetie, I can handle them. Just give me a sec," he tells her with a smile on his face as he dodges another flaming attack. Aang continues to duck and leap over the soldier's attack, flipping over their heads to receive only a single burn on his robes. Katara tries to warn him, but Aang isn't listening. "Oh, for crying out loud," she sighs, opening her flask and bending the water to put out the flames. She reaches out, taking control of the water in a nearby fountain. She bends it around, knocking the soldiers away and freezing them in place. "Quit trying to set my boyfriend on fire!" she yells as she bends the water. Moments later, all of the guards are either knocked out or stuck to the walls by ice. "Whoa!" Aang says with a smile. Katara moves to her boyfriend, but another soldier leaps to attack while the two are distracted. Katara finally gets angry, using her bending to create ice spikes that lash out at the soldier, but Zuko's hand suddenly grabs her wrist. "Katara, stop!" he orders her. She struggles briefly. "Let go, Zuko, you're hurting me. Don't make me hurt you back," she tells him. "I'm hurting you? What are you doing to my soldiers, my people?" he asks her. Aang steps forward, anger in his voice. "Let her go, Zuko. She said you're hurting her," he orders his friend. Zuko continues to hold Katara's wrist, telling them that she must first agree to stop attacking his soldiers. "Your soldiers attacked her first. Let her go," Aang yells back. "I am the Fire Lord. I have the right to protect my citizens," Zuko tells them both. Aang takes a deep breath, blowing the air out and bending it to be a large gust, throwing Zuko away. The Fire Lord quickly gets to his feet, launching fireballs that Aang blocks with water. Aang tries to explain that he just came to talk, to figure out why Zuko has forgotten what they fought for. His eyes begin to glow as he loses control, though. "Maybe Avatar Roku was right. Maybe a promise is a promise," Aang shouts angrily. The air begins to whip around them as Aang begins to hover into the air. But Katara is there, trying to calm Aang and tell him that he won't be able to control himself in the Avatar state while so emotionally charged. She reaches out, putting her hands on his face. "You have to calm down. Please, sweetie, for me," she asks. Aang falls, coming back to his senses. He knows he almost did something that he would have regretted. "Katara's right. We both need to calm down. We need to talk," Zuko tells his friends. Aang looks at the Fire Lord for a moment. "That's what I wanted to do in the first place!" he shouts. Moments later, Zuko is leading them throughout the city of Yudao. He explains that this is the oldest Fire Nation colony in the Earth Kingdom, that many of the families that live here immigrated 100 years ago. He leads them through the city, showing them the areas where the Fire Nation and Earth Kingdom people mix. But Katara points out how it doesn't seem like the two people are on equal terms as they pass an Earth Kingdom citizen polishing the boots of a Fire Nation citizen. "It's not perfect, Katara, but all of the city's people, including the Earth Kingdom people, are better off now than they were 100 years ago," he tells her. But Aang tells him that if he doesn't move the colony, then Zuko could start another war. Zuko tells them about his incident with the Yudao mayor, how he had told his soldiers to seize the man for his words. Suddenly, a large boulder sprouted from the earth between them, and Zuko turned to see the mayor's wife, an earthbender. "Fire Lord, please, forgive my husband's foolishness. I've told him time and again to control his tongue, but he never does," the woman explains. Zuko is shocked to discover the mayor's wife is an earthbender, and she explains that so is their daughter as she frees her with a sharpened spike of earth. "I may be an earthbender, but through my father's bloodline, I am a Fire Nation citizen. My father taught me to always be loyal to my people, something you obviously never learned from your father," the young girl tells the Fire Lord as she retrieves her weapon. The mayor's wife bows, asking the Fire Lord to stay in the city for a few days so they may show him their way of life. Zuko continues to lead Aang and Katara through the city, explaining that he was shown what his people had built in the city and what would be destroyed if they were forced to leave. "Ever since my coronation, I've had trouble finding peace. Now, I think I've finally figured out why. I'd forgotten my people," Zuko tells them. Finally, Zuko turns to Aang, explaining that he won't allow them to take the lives that his people have been building for the last 100 years. Harmony requires 4 separate nations to balance each other out. You can't have balance if one nation occupies another, Aang yells back. Katara looks back, seeing the mayor and his family, a mixture of the Fire Nation and Earth Kingdom. Maybe Yu Dao could be the exception, she whispers. Aang is surprised, but Zuko agrees that the older colonies should all be an exception. Well, regardless, the Earth King needs to be a part of whatever's next. If Aang and I can arrange a meeting, will you be there, Zuko? Katara asks. Zuko agrees. Outside, the crowd wonders what is taking Aang so long. They begin to get angry, preparing to storm the gates. Sokka steps forward, trying to calm them, but a rock sails out and cracks him in the head. That's it, Toph huffs. She stamps her feet, rising up on a patch of earth. Don't you dunderheads know who I am? I'm Toph Beifong, the greatest earthbender of all time. When my friend tells you to calm down, you calm down. Next person to throw anything or say anything gets a boulder to the noggin. Get it? She yells. The crowd backs away in fear, quickly calming. Finally, Aang and Katara return, explaining quickly what happened in the city. They tell Toph and Sokka, as well as the protesters, that they are going to meet with the Earth King and decide the next step. Smellerbee nods, telling Aang that she can give them 4 days. After that, the freedom fighters will figure out a solution on our own, she warns. The group quickly board Appa, flying off for the Earth Kingdom capital. Meanwhile, Zuko returns to the Fire Nation Royal Palace, quietly walking through the halls. So the Fire Lord has returned, May tells him, stepping out from the shadows. He tells her what happened, and May is upset that Zuko left without telling her. If you're having problems, you're supposed to tell me. I'm your girlfriend, she tells him. She knows that he has been having trouble sleeping, and knows that his bodyguards are idiots. She leads him into the next room, telling him that she asked some friends to come help. In the next room, the Kyoshi warriors stand ready. That night, Zuko once again awakens, feeling something in the palace. He steps outside the room, asking the warriors if they've seen anything, but they inform him that the night is quiet. Go back to sleep. You have to at least try, Suki tells him, but he tells them that he is going to get a drink of water instead. Do you want someone to escort you? Suki asks. But Zuko waves them off. I'll be fine. The walk will do me good, he tells them. Zuko walks through the palace grounds, a pot of tea in his hands. He finally arrives at the prison, pulling open the door to his father's cell. He begins to pour the tea. I need your advice, father, Zuko says, bowing his head. In the shadows, Ozai smiles. Appa gently drifts through the clouds as Aang and Katara sit together, their heads resting against each other in a loving embrace. Ugh! Sokka sighs behind them, disgusted by the show of affection. What? Everybody does it, Toph tells him, picking her nose. But Sokka looks at her, explaining he was talking about them. Oh, you too, he tells her when he notices what she's doing. Finally, they drift over Toph's school and she goes to stand at the edge of Appa's saddle. Well, it's been fun, you guys, but I have to get back to my school, she tells him, preparing to leap off. But Sokka reaches out, holding her back and telling her she can't go and leave him with Katara and Aang. Well, you could come with me, she tells him with a smile. Sokka pauses. No. Hey, wait! What if I come with you? He tells her. Great idea, Sokka. I wish I'd thought of it, Toph tells him with a sigh. He turns back to his sister and Aang, telling them that he is going to check out the school. Katara agrees, telling him they'll pick him up on the way back from the Earth King. Aang moves to Appa's head, offering to land near the school, but Toph tells him not to worry, they're close enough to the ground, and she reaches out, grabbing Sokka's hand and pulling him to the edge of the saddle, and they leap off, plummeting towards the earth below as Sokka screams his head off. I gotta let go of you! But don't worry, Toph yells at him. I'm worried! Sokka begins to scream, Toph bends the earth below them, creating a platform that they slide down to the earth below. And with a final scream, Sokka finally lands hard on the ground. "Told you not to worry," Toph says with a smile. "I tasted my own stomach about halfway down, but by the end, not a bad way to travel," Sokka tells her, rubbing his backside. As they walk through the forest to her school, Sokka asks why she started it in the first place. Toph explains that she discovered how fulfilling teaching could be after she'd taught Aang how to earthbend. "Aw, who are you kidding? You just like to tell people what to do," Sokka tells her, not believing a word she's saying. "Yeah, and yelling. I love yelling," Toph tells him with a big smile. Stepping from the woods, they see Toph's 3 students walking away, bags over their shoulders. "Just where do you think you lily-livers are going? Don't tell me you were trying to escape, give up on your training. I'm gonna put so much hurt in you, you won't remember what day of the week it is," she yells at them. The students are shocked to see their teacher, reacting in a mix of fear and surprise. Toph sighs and introduces her students to Sokka. Hotun, Penga, and Mu. The Dark One. "Lily-livers, this is my friend Sokka," she says. After the introductions are made, Toph cracks her knuckles, remembering they were just talking about pain. "Please, Sifu Toph, we weren't trying to run away. We were kicked out," Hotun explains, wringing his hands in fear. "They wouldn't even let me pack my shoes," Penga fumes. "I hate practicing my forms, but getting kicked out is worse," the Dark One tells her. Toph's eyes widen in shock. "Kicked out? Kicked out by who?" she demands. Inside, the firebending class is interrupted as the door pushes inward, with Toph demanding that they leave her school. Master Kunio demands to know who disturbs the firebending dojo, but the ground begins to rumble at his feet. "This is the Beifong Metal Bending Academy," she tells him, but Master Kunio twirls, burning the Beifong flag to reveal a Fire Nation flag. He tells her that they left the school for the Harmony Restoration movement, but now that Fire Lord Zuko has withdrawn his support, "We've come to reclaim what is rightfully ours," he tells her. Toph slams her fist against the wall, explaining that this is the first ever metal bending school. Master Kunio smiles, telling her that it is wrong to sell fantasies to these poor dupes. "Everyone knows that metal bending doesn't exist," he tells her with a smile. Suddenly, the weapons come off the wall, with a spear twisting around Kunio's head. At first he screams in fear, but finally drops into a fighting stance. "Watch carefully, disciples. Your master is about to teach this dirt girl a lesson," he tells them. The ground begins to rumble as Toph adjusts her own stance. "Bring it on!" she tells him, but Sokka is there trying to calm both sides down. He suggests they let the students fight to decide which school is more effective. Kunio smiles, agreeing that the students should fight to the death. How about a match to sit instead?" Sokka asks, explaining which team forces the other to sit down first wins. "As long as we still get to beat people up," the fire students nod. Sokka nods, motioning for the door, and asking Master Kunio and his students to return in 3 days. At first, the firebending master begins to argue, but Toph tightens the spear around his head. 3 days it is," Kunio finally agrees, and the firebenders leave the school. Meanwhile, Aang and Katara have arrived in the Earth Kingdom capital. Aang tells Appa to find a hill to rest on before the two leap off into the air on Aang's glider. Landing in the city, the two decide that they need to find a place to spend the night. Before they can find their way to Iroh's tea house, they are distracted by a scream of glee. 2 girls come forward, telling Aang that they are members of the official Aang fan club. "Wow, did you hear that? They started a fan club for me," Aang tells Katara with a big smile. Katara looks at the 2 girls, not happy. "Wonderful," she tells Aang. Aang introduces Momo to the group before finally motioning to Katara. "And this is Katara," he tells them. "Ahem," Katara coughs. "My girlfriend, Katara," Aang corrects. Katara waves and one of the girls bows. "What an honor it is to meet Aang's first girlfriend," the girl says with a suspicious smile on her face. Katara doesn't like that look, and tries to steer Aang away, noting that they still need to find a place to stay. But the girls interrupt again, offering to let them stay at the clubhouse. And so they take them to the clubhouse, explaining that it was modeled after the original Air Temple. While not quite sure, Aang bows to them for their kindness. "I love it! Thank you, official Avatar Aang fan club. I'm flattered," he tells them before grabbing Katara's hand and pulling her in to check it out. "Can't wait," Katara groans. Meanwhile, in the Fire Nation, Fire Lord Zuko sits down in front of his father's cell while the two share tea. Ozai begins to tell a story of when Zuko was younger and how he ran to save a turtle crab from a hawk. "Even then, you possessed an odd affinity for the weak," Ozai remembers. After Zuko had saved the crab, he watched the hawk, realizing that it would starve without food. Zuko couldn't decide who he would side with, but it didn't matter. A massive wave pulled him out to the ocean, and Ozai was forced to jump in to save his son. But Zuko doesn't want to hear any more stories. He came here asking how his father would sleep with the pressures of ruling the Fire Nation. "I told you," Ozai answers simply. Finally, the former Fire Lord stands, telling his son that he is tired. "Perhaps we will continue this tomorrow. Bring more tea," he tells him before returning to the shadows of his cell. Back at the metal bending school, the students launch an attack at a row of metal coins. But the coins don't even shiver. They begin to argue and fight amongst themselves as Toph and Sokka watch. "These were the most qualified students you could find, huh?" Sokka finally asks. But Toph rolls up her sleeve, explaining that it was the space bracelet that found the students. "Oh, how I miss you, Space Sword," Sokka says sadly, looking towards the ceiling. Toph explains that a year ago she realized the bracelet would shiver when she was near someone who was super emotional. So Toph thought that someone who could make the bracelet move could also possibly be a metal bender. "And I started recruiting them for my school," she tells him. Sokka agrees, remembering that Katara discovered she was a waterbender when she would get super mad at him. "Yeah, but there's a problem finding students that way. What kind of people get super emotional in public?" Toph asks, looking in at her students who are still fighting amongst themselves. Crazy people?" Sokka asks. "Crazy people!" Toph agrees with a scream. Toph also points out that not a single one of her students has ever been able to move metal. "Not even a coin," she grumbles. Sokka suddenly has a brilliant idea, telling her that he is a motivational bender and he can get them to do it. "Leave your students to me," he tells her. Later, Sokka stands before the students, a cloth wrapped around his head as he holds up a coin to them. "To become a true metal bender, you not only have to see the metal, but hear the metal, taste the metal, be the metal," he explains to them. "That doesn't make sense," Hotun tells him. But Sokka just yells at them to give it a shot and orders them to take a strong stance. He steps before them, telling them to gather their chi in their gut, to feel their guts heating up like a furnace. "Now let your gut furnace refine your senses. Close your eyes and feel the earth around you. Then feel the metal within the earth. Now feel the metal coins and stop them in midair," he yells, throwing a stack of coins at the students. But they all just get hit in the head, falling to the ground and moaning. Toph comes up and punches him on the arm. "Nice going, oh bender of people's motivation. Amazing what a difference a fancy headband makes," she tells him with a smile. "You're not very helpful right now, you know." "You're not very helpful right now," he tells her. Meanwhile, Aang is busy showing off for the girls at the fan club while Katara looks on, unhappy. First, he shows them his air scooters, then makes music for them when one of the girls brings forth an air flute. Finally, Katara comes forward, telling Aang they should probably get going to meet the Earth King. "You're probably right," Aang agrees. As they leave, Aang waves bye to the girls. "Weren't they amazing?" he asks Katara. He tells her that he knows it's silly, but having the club was almost like having a family again. "Thanks for agreeing to stay there for the night, sweetie. It meant the world to me," Aang tells her. Katara is shocked and suddenly feels bad about her jealousy. "Don't thank me, Aang. I don't deserve it," she tells him as they walk through the city streets. Back in the Fire Nation, Zuko returns to his father's cell, once more bringing tea. I stayed up all night thinking about what you said, Zuko tells Ozai, explaining that he believes his father thinks he should have sided with the Hawk, because it is strong and noble like the Fire Nation, that it had earned its meal. But Zuko explains that he has done that. He has sided with his people and has begun to look out for their needs. But Ozai shakes his head, telling his son that he misunderstands. Why he does not sleep is because of his inability to choose sides. He is wrong about the Hawk. What I'm saying is that there is no right or wrong apart from what you decide. Who you choose to defend deserves to be defended solely because you chose them. You are the Fire Lord. What you choose, by definition, is right, Ozai tells his son. There is a moment of silence between the two before Zuko explodes at his father. No! Right and wrong are bigger than me, or you, or even the Avatar, Zuko tells him, explaining that he believes that he, Aang, and the Earth King can come closest to what's right by working together. But Ozai disagrees, asking Zuko if he believes that the Earth King will be reasonable after what the Fire Nation has done to him and his people. Do you think he will treat the colonies fairly? Ozai asks. He asks if Zuko thinks that the Earth King will send his armies, and tells Zuko that he must defend his colonials furiously. Not simply because they are your people, but because they are an expression of your will. Zuko continues to argue, telling his father that he trusts Avatar Aang's thoughts on the subject. Finally, Ozai stands, telling his son that he sickens him. Leave my presence, he commands. Zuko sits, shocked by his father's words. Who are you to talk to me this way? Have you forgotten your current place? He demands. But Ozai merely repeats his words. Leave my presence, he shouts. As Zuko leaves the prison, Suki watches him walking through the dark. At the school, Toph once again instructs her students, commanding them to stoke their gut furnace and feel the metal before them. Now kick! Kick like your life depends on it, she yells. The students lash out! But still the poles do not shiver. Aren't you going to yell at us? Hotun asks. No, Toph answers sadly. Sokka interrupts her, asking to speak with her outside about something very important. I just had the best idea ever, he exclaims as they step outside. He explains that to make them metal benders, they have to make them super emotional. And how do you plan to do that? Let me guess, 2 fancy headbands? Toph asks. But Sokka ignores her, explaining that with Hotun, they just need to use Doom, and with Penga, they just need to use shoes, and the only one he can't figure out is the Dark One, his real name. I promised I wouldn't tell anybody, Toph explains. Sokka immediately starts begging her to tell him what his real name is. She leans in, whispering, No way! What were his parents thinking? Sokka explains, leaning back in surprise. As Sokka continues, explaining his plan, he tells her that they need some metal, and Toph leads him down into the school's armory, where the Fire Nation armor and weapons wait. Sokka begins to describe what he needs Toph to do with her metal bending, and begin to bend the armor into a different shape. That's incredible, Toph Beifong, you've truly outdone yourself, he tells her when their work is complete. Just call me the greatest earthbender of all time, she laughs, dusting her hands off. Sokka laughs too, but Toph pauses. No, really, I want you to call me that, she tells him. Toph, you're the greatest earthbender of all time, Sokka says. Gee, thanks, Sokka. That's sweet of you, Toph tells him with a big smile. Meanwhile, back at the palace of the Earth King, Aang and Katara bow before the ruler. The king is happy to see them, glad that they are in the Earth Kingdom and aiding with the removal of the Fire Nation colonies. That's why we're here, Your Majesty. We'd like to set a meeting between you and Fire Lord Zuko. Yu Dao is still there, Katara explains. For now, Aang adds. King Kuei is shocked that Zuko still refuses to continue his support for the Harmony Restoration movement. Earth King Kuei, I am on your side, Aang tells him, believing that the Fire Nation people don't belong in the Earth Kingdom. But Katara interrupts. Fire Lord Zuko has legitimate concerns about the colonials that still live here. We really need to sit down and talk through the options. Maybe there's something we missed, she tells them. But King Kue isn't so sure. Back at the Beifong school, the students sit outside that night, with Ho-Tun talking about how outside is so doomy. But Sokka explains that the camping is for a team bonding experiment. He gathers them around, beginning to tell a story about the flying boar flag that hung in the school. Sifu Toph hung that banner there to placate the winged boar spirit that still haunts these mountains, he tells them, leaning into the fire. The winged boar spirit, the harbinger of doom, and the eater of fine footwear, he yells. Suddenly, the creature appears behind them, created from the bended metal of the Fire Nation army. And now that Kunyo's burned down the banner, we can probably expect... Oh look! Speaking of the winged boar spirit, it's right there! He yells. Ho-Tun immediately faints, while Penga yells that the boar spirit is eating her shoes. This is ridiculous. I know that's you in there, Sifu Toph, the Dark One says, not worried at all. The head opens, revealing the smiling face of Toph. Very perceptive, Dark One. Or should I say, Moochie Gucci Lapucci the Third, she yells. The Dark One is shocked, falling to his knees as tears begin to pour down his face. By saying that name, you have lodged a splinter into my soul, he gasps. Sokka steps forward, ordering the students to harness the emotion that is coursing through their bodies. Let's metal bend, Team Beifong! He yells, throwing coins at the students. But the students are all laying on the ground, crushed by their emotions. At the Earth Kingdom Palace, Aang and Katara continue to eat their delicious meal. Finally, King Kue returns, thanking them for giving him time to ponder their proposal. But his face falls when Aang asks when they should set up the meeting. I'm sorry, but you're not going to like what I have to say, he tells them. All my life, I've been weak. So weak that my most trusted advisor was able to hide 100 years' war behind a curtain of lies. Well, I'm tired of being weak. It's time for me to be a man. I will not stand for any more lies. I will order the general how to lead my troops to Yudao and enforce harmony, he declares. Aang stands up, trying to explain to the king that sending troops will be seen as a declaration of war. But the Earth King turns away, telling him that the Fire Nation colonials will either leave peacefully or face dire consequences. If you are not with me, Avatar Aang, then I can only assume that you are against me, he declares, leaving the room. That night, Sokka finds Toph on the steps of her school. He tells her not to give up, that he has the new best idea ever. Have you ever thought about metal? She asks. Nope. When I have extra thinking time, I usually spend it on food. Meat, specifically, Sokka tells her. But Toph continues, explaining that metal is part of the earth that has been refined. By going through pressure and pain, she explains that she discovered metal bending in a tiny cell when she was being brought back to her parents. They expected me to be something I'm not. All I felt was pressure and pain, she tells him. When she discovered her students, she brought them here to be metal benders. I was gonna make them tough enough to move the most stubborn part of the most stubborn element. I expected them to be something they're not, she explains. Inside, Ho-Tun, Penga, and the Dark One stop trying to sneak out and listen to their teacher's words. How is that any different than what my parents did to me? Maybe the Beifong Metal Bending Academy is just a way for me to pass all that pressure and pain to someone else. She sighs, and she walks away from Sokka, explaining to him that when Kunyo arrives tomorrow, she is going to sit down in front of him. He can have his school back. Rushing from the Earth Palace, Aang and Katara hop aboard Appa, hoping to return to Yudao quickly, hoping to convince the Fire Nation colonials to leave peacefully before the Earth Kingdom's army arrives. As they leave, Aang points out that King Kuei is right, and no one should break their promise. Unknown to them, someone hides in the bushes. The young girl sends out a messenger hawk, telling it to warn the sisters in the Avatar Aang fan club in Yu Dao that Aang will need their help. The next morning, Kunio bursts open the school doors, still with the spear wrapped around his head, but now draped with Fire Nation flags. "Nice headgear," Sokka comments. "I find it a convenient way to carry my flags. I can take it off whenever I want," Kunio growls as he storms past. The Fire Dojo master walks up to Toph, demanding to know where her students are, that it is time to begin. "Our deadly match to the... sit," he exclaims. But Toph is sad, telling him that she doesn't know where her students are, but it doesn't matter. "You win this match to sit," she tells him, and she begins to sit down. But suddenly her students burst through the door. "Sifu Toph, don't sit down!" Hotun yells. And with these words, the metal coins shiver a small amount, and it suddenly shoots across the room, hitting Toph in the butt, bringing her back to her feet. Toph is too shocked to be angry as she glances around the room. "Hotun? Did you just metal bend?" she asks. She smiles at them, telling them that normally she would pound them into the ground for hitting her in the butt. But in this case, good job, she smiles, giving him the thumbs up. Kunio tells his students to attack, and the metal benders spread out. Sokka throws a handful of coins, giving his friends some ammo. Hotun uses the coins to attack one of the firebenders, knocking them out of the air. Penga laughs as she hits another student in the butt with the coins. "This is easy," she shouts. The firebenders try to create a shield, but the coins only heat up, hurting them more. Kunio yells for his students to keep fighting, but the three metal benders continue to launch coins across the room, knocking him around until he falls on his butt and sits down. A short time later, the firebenders help their teacher as they limp away. Sokka leans down, congratulating the metal benders on a job well done, and the Dark One tells Toph that they overheard what she said about them last night. "I don't get it. I didn't say one nice thing about you," she says, not understanding. But Penga smiles. "You told Sokka that you expected us to become metal benders," she says with a smile. "Nobody's ever expected me to be anything other than a wimp, Sifu Toph. You're the first person to believe that we can become something more than we are," Hotun tells her with a smile. Toph wipes away a tear where her students can't see, before suddenly turning on them. "Well, what are you lily-livers waiting for then? You think getting some coins to fly through the air makes you metal-bending masters? Get back to practice!" she yells with a smile. They all bow with respect. "Yes, Sifu Toph," they shout in unison. Meanwhile, Zuko sits in the Fire Lord's throne, flames shooting all around him before he sighs. "This isn't me," he says with a wave of his hand putting out the flames. "I know you've been secretly meeting with Ozai," May tells him as she enters the chamber. Zuko is shocked, asking where she heard this. "Does it matter? Not from you," she tells him with a frown. Zuko apologizes for screwing up, telling her that he loves her, but May shakes her head, letting him know that he loves his secrets more. "Goodbye, Fire Lord," she says, bowing and turning to leave. Anger, sadness, and despair fill Zuko. "May, come back! I order you to come back!" he shouts, but she leaves him alone in the empty room. "Why would I say that?" he hisses to himself. Behind him, Suki bows. She tells him that it was her fault and that she was the one who told May and wanted her to speak with him. "However, that wasn't quite what I had in mind," she tells him. She explains that she followed him and that the Kyoshi warriors are worried about him. "I'm really worried about you," she whispers, reaching out her hand for his. But they are interrupted as General Mok enters the room. The general bows as he gives his report. "Your suspicions are confirmed. The Earth King's army now marches towards Yu Dao," the general tells him. The armies of the Earth Kingdom march through the mountains, preparing to forcibly remove the Fire Nation colonials from their lands. And meanwhile, the Fire Nation Navy moves across the oceans, preparing to defend those loyal to the Fire Nation, and the kingdoms prepare to clash. Rain pours down, soaking the battlefield. The soldiers of the Fire Nation clash with the army of the Earth Kingdom. Flames shoot, blocked by the Towers of Earth. Above, Avatar Aang and Fire Lord Zuko look down. One moment, I know deep in my heart that I must defend my people. But then the next, doubt creeps in. Maybe I'm supposed to follow through with the Harmony Restoration movement, Zuko says, looking down at the destruction below. But the spirit of his father is shouting at him over his shoulder, telling him to prove himself worthy of the throne. Zuko turns to his friend Aang, asking why he didn't silence his father forever, so that he could know peace. Aang turns his face downward, listening to the words of Avatar Roku telling him what he has to do. I don't think I'll ever stop feeling lost, Zuko sighs, before turning to Aang. Go ahead, Aang! Do it! He shouts into the storm. Aang closes his eyes before they snap open, revealing his glowing eyes as he enters the Avatar state. He rises up, the elements swirling around him. And for a moment, Zuko can see the ghostly image of Roku, and behind him, his mother. His eyes widen and he reaches out for her, but fire leaps from his fingertips and he attacks Aang. Aang sits up with a yell, the dream shocking him awake. And elsewhere, Zuko also awakens, staring down at the phantom wounds that he received. Later that morning, Appa flies over the city of Yu Dao, and Aang leans over the saddle, shouting down at the citizens below him. Fire Nation citizens of Yu Dao, you must evacuate immediately! Your lives are in danger, he shouts. But suddenly, fireballs shoot past him. Watch out, sweetie, we're being attacked by firebenders, Aang tells Katara. You mean earthbenders, she notes as she dodges the large rocks that come next. Next comes a chained meteor rock, which Aang knocks aside with a wind tunnel. Katara manages to freeze a group of throwing axes next. They look down, with Katara pointing out the fleeing axe thrower. Aang leaps into the air onto his glider and quickly gives chase. The thrower leaps through a window, with Aang following to discover an axe factory. Why'd it have to be an axe factory? He sighs. Axes begin to fly towards him, with Aang dodging and knocking them aside. Finally, he sends an air kick that knocks the thrower to the ground. Don't worry, I caught him, Aang tells Katara as she finally catches up with him. They're both shocked to discover that the thrower was Sneers, who just days ago was a part of the protesters trying to get rid of the Fire Nation. Hi, Avatar Aang. Hi, Katara, Sneers says with a smile, rubbing his neck. Anger fills Aang as he demands to know why Sneers was attacking them. Because you're trying to force us out of our homes, Avatar Aang. We're not leaving, a voice calls. Kori Morishita, daughter of the mayor, enters the room. We are the Yu Dao Resistance, she announces. Aang steps forward, trying to convince Kori that she and her people need to evacuate, while Katara steps forward, demanding to know why Sneers switched sides. He explains that he grew up hating the Fire Nation, but then came to live in Yu Dao. And without meaning to, I fell in love with an ashmaker, he says, holding Kori tight. Aang looks at them, shocked. Wait, you're going out with you? He asks. Sneers nods. Yeah, I hid it from my friends for the longest time, but I'm done with that. My girlfriend is Fire Nation, he says. The rest of the resistance chimes in, saying how so are some of their cousins, stepfathers, or even favorite teachers. One smiles. Even the guy who sells me mochi every morning. Katara stares at him for a moment. You joined the resistance to defend a guy who sells you mochi? She asks. It's really good mochi, he tells her. Kori steps up, telling Aang to let the protesters come, but he tries to explain that the Earth Kingdom army is coming, and the resistance won't be able to stand against them. We can if the Avatar joins us, Sneers points out, but Aang refuses, telling them that he agreed to work with the Earth King. But Kori turns, saying that if Aang won't help them, maybe the other Avatars will. Everyone turns to see a group of what appears to be air nomads enter the room. Greetings, Aang. The Yu Dao chapter of the Avatar Aang fan club has eagerly awaited your arrival. I am Xing Ying, the club president. Their leader introduces herself. Aang is excited. Look, Katara, another fan club, he shouts happily. Yay, Katara responds less happily. Aang steps forward, inspecting their air nomad garb, complimenting on their accuracy. They even have Airbender tattoos painted on their heads. But Xing Ying tells Aang that they're real tattoos. And Aang is shocked, telling her that Air Nomad studies for years to earn those tattoos. The fan club explains that they study hundreds of Airbender-like forms to earn their tattoos, but Aang becomes angry. For you to treat our tattoos like some part of your costume, my culture isn't a game, he tells them as he storms out of the building, going to prepare for the arrival of the Earth Kingdom. Katara shouts after him, but Aang just looks over his shoulder. It's time we separate the nations and restore harmony, he shouts angrily. Meanwhile, Zuko sits before an altar aboard his ship on the way to the Earth Kingdom. He questions himself, believing that he must protect the Fire Nation people of Yu Dao. But he knows that it goes beyond that the people who have mixed between the Fire Nation and the Earth Kingdom seem so normal, but he still doubts himself. Leading an army into the Earth Kingdom is exactly what my father would do, he sighs. He questions that if doing the same thing, but for better reasons, makes any difference. But there's one person he wishes to ask, but he can't, and sighs as he looks down at a picture of his Uncle Iroh. I wish you were here, Uncle. I miss you, he sighs. The moment is interrupted as the general enters, informing him that they have reached the shores of the Earth Kingdom. Zuko stands, taking the helmet of the Fire Lord, and begins his march. Back in Yu Dao, Aang looks out from one of the rooftops before he is interrupted by Katara, asking if he is okay. He tells her that his head hurts, and that he thinks he figured out why the nations need to be separate for harmony. That the stronger of two nations always hurts the weaker one. You once told that Guru Patik taught you that the foreign nations are one and the same, Katara points out. But Aang explains that he doesn't want them to be. I love being an air nomad. I love our philosophy, temples, holidays, food, everything that makes us different from the rest of the world, he tells her. He tells her that as the last air nomad, he needs to preserve his people's way of life. Yet Katara continues to question him, asking how he plans on doing that. I don't know, but I do know this. Air nomad culture can't survive in a world where other nations invade each other and corrupt each other. I have to see the harmony restoration movement through to the end, he tells her. At Beifong's metal bending school, Toph finds Sokka sitting on the front steps looking up into the sky. Katara and Aang should have picked me up by now. They're probably so caught up in their ooginess that they forgot all about me, he sighs to her. But suddenly, the sun is blocked out and Toph can sense a difference. Ah, quit your kissy-kissy belly-aching, Sokka. Appa is here, she announces. But Sokka tells her that it's not Appa and steps out to greet Suki as she descends from a Fire Nation balloon. Sokka runs forward, pulling Suki into a hug and kiss. She tells them that they received a complaint about a dirt girl and a water savage taking over one of the schools. But Suki doesn't stay long, starting to climb back aboard the ship. You're leaving already? Sokka asks. But Suki looks over her shoulder. So are you! Come on, I need you both, she tells them. As they climb on the ladder, Toph yells over her shoulder for the students to keep practicing. Until you can do some real metal bending, you're not going anywhere. Now go work on your forms, she yells. As they float over the land, Toph and Sokka question Suki on what she needs their help with. Suki tells them to look down and see for themselves. Looking over the side, they see the column of the Fire Nation army marching forward. Meanwhile, in Yu Dao, Katara finally tells Aang that she changed her mind about the Harmony Restoration movement. She tells him that when she saw Corey's family, she saw something. I didn't just see them, she begins. But Aang stands, interrupting her as he sees the protesters approaching, a battering ram hoisted over their shoulders. Aang leaps down, confronting Smellerbee. "It's been 3 days, Aang. Did all that talking get you anywhere? Is the Fire Nation out of Yu Dao?" she questions. Aang asks her for more time, but she isn't having any of it. "People of the Earth Kingdom, attack!" she shouts. The protesters send the battering ram forward, forcing Aang to leap out of the way to avoid being hit as it slams into the city gates. Others rush forward, weapons drawn, yet Katara uses her water to knock their weapons aside. Rushing forward, Aang slams into the battering ram, headbutting it and destroying it in one blow. "Sifu Toph would have been proud," he says with a smile. Using the air, he knocks the debris aside, pushing it away from the people with the help of Katara. One of the rocks is about to slam into Smellerbee, but Aang pulls her out of the way. She thanks him, telling him that she feels bad for distracting him. "Distracting me?" he asks. Smellerbee points out that they're not dumb enough to actually try to attack with a battering ram if the Avatar is around, and she points to the large drill that is going through the outer wall. Meanwhile, Suki is finishing explaining the entire situation to Toph and Sokka. Suki tells them that they need to stop the Fire Nation before it can reach the city. "So what's the plan, big guy?" Toph asks, looking at Sokka. He thinks on it for a moment before asking if she can get them inside one of those tanks. She slams into the ground, creating an underground slide that they can use. "Not a problem," she smiles. They all leap inside, sliding down to the bottom. "Man, you've really been into slides recently," Sokka notes, rubbing his butt. She looks up, feeling the rumble of the tanks on the earth. And finally, she reaches up through the dirt, grabbing hold of the underside of the tank, punching her way inside. Coming out of the tunnel, Sokka and Suki run to catch up to her. Inside the tank, Toph turns to Sokka. "Step 1 complete? Now, what's step 2? She asks. Sokka shrugs. "Not sure. I was sort of hoping step 2 would come to me while we were working on step 1, he tells her. Suki takes the controls, telling them that while they work it out, she's going to try and get them to Zuko. "He seems so lonely," she tells him. "More like screwy in the head," Toph snorts. Suddenly, the best idea ever comes to Sokka. He points out the viewpoint, telling Suki to get them next to each tank, one by one. At Yu Dao, Aang is still trying to reason with the protesters as they break into the city. Sneers steps forward, trying to reason with his old friends. But Corey steps up as well, telling the protesters that they can't force them from their city. "You're dating an ash maker?" Smellerbee starts to yell. The entire time, Aang continues to try and reason with everyone, but literally no one is listening to him. Sneers finally steps between his girlfriend and friend, telling Smellerbee that maybe Yu Dao isn't part of the Earth Kingdom or the Fire Nation. "What if it's part of both?" Corey adds. Katara steps up to Aang, explaining that that's what she's been trying to tell him. But they are interrupted when one of the protesters steps forward, bending a chunk of earth and launching it forward at Corey. Katara manages to knock the earth aside, but the battle has already begun. The Yu Dao resistance moves forward, preparing to defend themselves. "Aw, come on! How come nobody ever wants to talk?" Aang yells, watching as the two sides begin to clash. Aang moves forward, throwing Smellerbee back through the gates with a gust of air. He tells her that he wants the Fire Nation out too. "But I want them to leave peacefully," he explains. But Smellerbee looks over her shoulder at the approaching army of the Earth Kingdom. "I don't think that's an option anymore, Aang," she tells him. "Looks like the Earth King has finally stepped up to his responsibilities." Aang stares out at the approaching army. "Ah, monkey feathers," he sighs. Behind him, the Avatar fan club approaches, offering to help Aang in any way they can to apologize for their unintentional disrespect of the air nomad culture. Outside, General Hao steps off his horse, unfolding the decree from King Kue.
"Attention, attention! By official decree of the Earth King Kue, the Earth Kingdom reclaims the former Fire Nation colony of Yu Dao. Fire Nation colonials who remain in the city are hereby declared criminals and shall be arrested on sight. The Harmony Restoration Movement shall be completed this day with or without the colonials' cooperation," he yells.
The protesters begin to cheer as Sneers and Corey run up to Aang, asking him to defend Yu Dao with them, or doom them. But they all turn, seeing the Fire Nation tanks rumbling into the fray. The Fang Club surrounds Aang, offering to protect him. But he scatters them with a gust of air, angrily telling them that they're just putting themselves into harm's way. Suddenly, one of the tanks opens, revealing Sokka and Toph. Suki too, she's driving, Toph tells them with a smile. Aang, Katara, you guys were supposed to pick me up, Sokka yells angrily. Sorry, Sokka, we got a little busy, Aang tells him sheepishly. As Lord Zuko looks on, General Hao steps up to Aang, telling him that he needs to end this conflict now. But Aang refuses, telling the general that there has to be another way. Katara moves towards her friends, asking how they had planned to slow the Fire Nation down. Toph smiles. Keep your eyes on me, Sugar Queen. Keep your eyes on me, she says, before leaping to the ground and stomping her feet. The earth begins to rumble beneath the tanks, and all the screws pop out, making all of the wheels and treads fall to the ground. General Hao looks on before yelling for his soldiers to attack. Lord Zuko stands up on his saddle, yelling for his men to defend the people of Yu Dao, and the two armies begin to rush at each other. No! Aang shouts, leaping into the air and landing in front of Zuko. He begins to hover, his eyes and tattoos glowing. The Harmony Restoration Movement was such a simple plan. Why couldn't you just follow through? He shouts. But Katara leaps in, pulling him away from the Fire Lord. Don't you remember what we talked about? You have to be calm to make sure your decision is right, she tells him, as they slide along an ice stream above the battle. But all these people are going to kill each other, Aang shouts. You let me worry about them, she tells him. And they land on a rooftop, and Katara finally finishes telling him what she was talking about earlier, that she didn't just see Corey's family. She saw their future together. She explains that if the nations have to be separate, that will mean them as well, and she pulls him in close. Go find a quiet place, Aang, and figure this out. Then, whatever your decision you make, I'll trust that it is the right one. I'll support you, even if it means that you have to fulfill your promise, she tells him, and she pulls him in for a kiss, even if it means we have to be apart. Aang flies away, finding a quiet spot on the mountain. The earth forms around him, creating a meditation chamber. He looks down at the Four Nations beaded necklace in his hands, and suddenly, he is a spirit speaking to Avatar Roku. I had a dream about you last night, he tells the former Avatar. Roku looks at him, telling him to fulfill his promise and restore balance to the world. But Aang still believes that doing so would go against the teachings of his people. Roku looks at him, telling him that the Avatar must put the world above his own people and nation, that it pains him to advocate for the end of his own great-grandson. And Aang is shocked as Roku explains. Ursa, Zuko's mother, is my granddaughter, he tells him. Back at the city, Sokka, Katara, and Toph look down at the battle. Moving amongst the soldiers are the members of Aang's fan club, trying to peacefully end the battle. Smellerbee and Sneers continue to fight, but Sokka is suddenly among them, separating them as he slides down on one of Toph's slides. Toph and Suki are among the Fire Nation soldiers, trying to disarm them and wrap them in metal. But another group rushes them, and it looks like they're in trouble. But suddenly, all of the Fire Nation helmets spin around, blinding them. Toph turns to find her students are there, fighting amongst the soldiers, spinning their helmets and attacking them with coins. The students fight alongside their teacher, fighting back to back with them. Look alive, lily livers! Time to spin some helmets, she yells. Katara is amongst the Earthbenders, knocking them aside with her water. She looks up, seeing the Earth King's balloon far overhead. Sliding along her water, she drops onto the deck of his ship. The king is cowering, telling Katara that he didn't know that Yu Dao would be like this. You never visited Yu Dao? She asks. The king shakes his head, telling her that he's never been out of the city. She holds out her hand, telling the king that he needs to see the people who have to live with his decisions. But it's not safe out there, he tells her. No, it's not, she agrees. He takes her hand, and the two slide back down. Below, General Hao stands before the members of the Yu Dao resistance, ordering them to surrender. Corey refuses, launching her meteor strike at him. The general easily knocks it aside, ordering his soldiers forward, but they are stopped by a massive blast of fire. When the smoke clears, the Fire Lord stands ready. Zuko meets General Hao in battle, the two swirling the elements around them. In the mountains, a blast of blue light suddenly shoots into the sky, and the battle pauses, and everyone turns, seeing Aang float towards them in the Avatar state. He hovers overhead, and Zuko tries to explain what is happening, but he suddenly sighs, removing his helmet. None of that matters, does it? I'm doing exactly what my father would have done, he tells his friend. Yet Aang isn't listening. He moves his hand, and the earth beneath them cracks apart. Zuko slips, beginning to plummet down into the chasm that Aang had created. Aang! I don't! He begins to yell. But the Avatar is there, taking his friend's hand and pulling him back to safety. Around Yu Dao, the earth continues to split as the city is separated from the land around it. Katara sees Aang pull Zuko to safety, and she rushes forward with the king. Aang stands before the city gates, before the Yu Dao resistance. Earth King Kuei, look at who you're fighting. Fire Nation, yes, but also Earth Kingdom. Water Tribe, and now Air Nomad, he explains, standing with his friends. Aang explains that the Earth King isn't fighting the Fire Nation, but a whole new kind of world. The protesters begin to yell, but the king holds up his hand, telling them that he needs to see the city. Nearby, Zuko struggles to his feet. So I was right then? All along my decision was right? He asks before collapsing to the ground. That night, the city below is quiet as Aang meditates on a rooftop. The spirit of Roku sits before him as Aang explains that he is not like Roku. Aang tells him that when he contemplates the world, he doesn't see nations on a map. He sees his friends and those that he has met along the way. I don't know how to contemplate the world without thinking about the people I care about, including Zuko, he explains. Roku tells him that he continues to put the world at risk, but Aang explains that this is a new world. There's no getting around risk, he says. Aang bows before the spirit of the past Avatar, telling him that he has to figure out this new world on his own. He reaches down, snapping his amulet and sending Roku's spirit drifting away. As Aang returns to the material world, he hears a voice calling him from the courtyard below. Guess who just woke up? Iroh tells him. Aang heads back inside Iroh's tea shop, looking at his friend sitting at the table. Thank you for bringing him to me, Avatar. He should have come earlier, on his own. Sometimes he forgets that he always has a place here. He may be the Fire Lord now, but he is still a stubborn boy, Iroh tells him, looking at his nephew. Aang sits with his friend, telling him that he has been asleep for 4 days. The Earth King has agreed to talk and lets Zuko know that Yu Dao can't go back to being a Fire Nation colony. It can't be an Earth Kingdom city either, Zuko says. Aang agrees. Yu Dao must become something new. The two sit, with Zuko apologizing for putting the strain of the promise on the Avatar, that he now knows that he can't run from the struggle of being the Fire Lord. But Aang looks at his friend, telling him that he doesn't give himself enough credit. I mean, you were right about Yu Dao, he explains. Aang tells Zuko that he knows that he is Avatar Roku's great-grandson, and that makes them family. Later, Aang sits before the members of his fan club, commending them on their attempt to lead peace on the battlefield. You already have the hearts of air nomads, and so I've decided to teach you the ways of the air nomads, he tells them as they sit before him. But you can't just be a fan club anymore. From now on, you'll be known as the Air Acolytes, he tells them with a smile as Katara looks on. Meanwhile, Zuko sits talking to someone. He tells her that he feels disconnected from the good in their family. That conversation after conversation with Ozai has led him nowhere. He refuses to reveal what happened to her, he says. So finally, he has come to a conclusion. You are the only person who can get the information out of Ozai. Tell me, what do you want in return for helping me find my mother? Zuko asks his sister. She smiles at him from the bonds of her straitjacket, telling him that helping the Fire Lord is compensation enough. Besides, not a day has gone by since you put me here that I haven't wondered, what exactly happened to our dear mother? She says, turning to look at herself in the mirror. Beside her, their mother looks on. I love you, Azula. I always have, she whispers.
I hope you guys enjoyed that full story, and if you did, please be sure to give the video a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. We will be continuing the full story series with The Search next time, but if you don't want to wait, we do have the individual complete stories in the playlist, which is linked down below. If you want to support Comicstorian, you can support us at patreon.com/Comicstorian or going to find us on Twitch at twitch.tv/Comicstorian, where we do podcasts every Tuesday and Thursday. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time, right here.